And welcome to Space Chicken. The podcast is totally horny for Terraflops. Today, I'm here with Wilson. Wilson, say hi, Wilson.
Hello, everybody.
Scott is out his way, so maybe halfway through this recording, we might have to stop and resize windows and stuff. So if that happens, bear with us. And if it doesn't happen, forget I mentioned anything. So today, we're back to one of our favorite words. It was of 2016, which was teraflops, right?
Oh, yes.
And this is because the PlayStation 4K Neo, which is a terrible name.
Which is Pro now?
I think that's what it is. So it's the PlayStation 4 Pro, which I feel like in their code name, they were trying to sneak 4K in there, and they were like, it's going to be super cute, dude. We're the PlayStation 4, just throw K at the end of it. And they were like, no, but it's new, so throw in Neo. Because that worked for Sega when they were throwing the word Neo into their stuff, so it's totally going to work for us. And it was very convoluted. And then, of course...
Any relation to the Matrix?
I don't think so. But Xbox is still calling theirs a Scorpio, right?
Yeah. As far as we can tell, that could change though for E3.
Yeah, so I think during E3 or maybe in a private presser, not a private presser, but a separate presser before E3, they'll probably announce it. They probably won't. They probably want to have a big stage thing because they're not actually announcing a new system. They're just announcing an upgraded system. But at the same time, they are theoretically launching a new system with backwards compatibility, and that's what these guys are doing, right? The new PlayStation 4K Neo Pro and Xbox's Project Scorpio, the two teraflop beasts of the East, if you will, they're essentially just making backwards compatible next generation consoles halfway through the normal console cycle. So they just want to, call it a 0.5 upgrade rather than the full upgrade, and saying that all the old games can run on them actually better than they used to. And that sounds an awful like another type of gaming, which is PC gaming. It sounds like PC gaming.
Absolutely. The Xbox guy, Phil Spencer, went out of his way to clarify that it wasn't even close to it being like a PC gaming kind of thing. Which I relate to the Apple-esque thing, in which, you have a new iPhone every year that runs the same thing that the other iPhones can, and so on. But he said, no way, this is not happening. So very big mixed messages when it comes to Xbox. And this topic, I don't think Sony has even touched the idea of it creating another PS4.
No, so Sony has done a really good thing this console cycle as far as their media relations is concerned, right? So the way they've handled a lot of stuff is when they want to push away and create a multimedia environment, for example, they don't talk about it, right? They don't go, hey, look, you can do this on the PlayStation. They didn't do that. And when the Xbox came around, the Xbox was like, hey, look, you can watch Netflix on your Xbox. And everyone, what the fuck do I want to do that for? Where are the video games? And then they got all mad at Microsoft, and Microsoft had to backpedal for 2 years. They spent 2 years backpedaling off of it, and then PlayStation comes out a few years after the backpedaling. It was like, hey, PlayStation TV. Pretty cool, right? And they're doing the same. They're doing a very similar. They're taking a similar approach at what I'm calling the 0.5 upgrade, which is I don't know, Xbox, why are we putting out a new system halfway through the console cycle? Huh? And then they can go, oh, but we're not a PC. We kind of are a PC. We're kind of whatever. And they're going to end up eating all of the slack as they try to dance and explain themselves, because Microsoft is terrible at explaining themselves or communicating vision. And then PlayStation's going to go, hey, PlayStation Pro, am I right, guys? I was like, oh my god, guys, we can watch 4K on this. It's amazing. So it's gonna be this fun little cat and mouse thing. But as we talk about the teraflops, right? Because teraflops is a whole new thing to me, right? When they talked about it last year at E3, and they were all getting out their teraflop measuring sticks and wagging their teraflop penises at each other, and I was always I was pretty familiar with how measuring systems gigabytes and terabytes and hertz of giga or otherwise. You know what I'm saying? Like, how many? What's the decimal number on your processors, or how many cores does it have? And you get all the way up there, and then all of a sudden, some dude was just going, so many teraflops, and I was like, what? You made that up? You made up teraflops? I've been doing this stupid nerd thing for a long time, and I'm not a computer programmer, and I'm not like a manufacturer of components or anything like that. I'm a consumer end guy. I've been saying it forever. I'm the consumer end of this relationship. But you fucking made up teraflops. You're a liar. That's not a real thing. And then I looked it up.
The thing too was they made it into like this big thing. It wasn't like, oh yeah, here's some teraflops. No, it was like, oh my god, it's got 6 teraflops of power. And I was on the same boat. I was like, oh my god, what the fuck is a teraflop? I don't know what we're talking about here. This is a wholly different language to me.
So, yeah, and you build computers. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're in a whole nother ballgame than I am. Like, you build a computer, so the teraflop, right, is the floating operational point, right? Is that what it is?
I don't know. You know more about this than I do.
It's the I pull it, the floating point operation. That's what the flop is, and then the tera, of course, is a million of that. And it's just a measurement of speed that takes the amount of shaders your graphics card can produce, right? Multiplied by the megahertz of that card times the number of instructions per clock, right? So we all hear the term overclocking, and we understand that to mean make the computer faster. So for every clock, how many instructions your computer can do, or in this case, your system, then that number is how many megaflops you have. Divide that number by 100,000. Yeah, by 100,000, because now we need to get a million flops. Get you to teraflops, right? So you have to you have to essentially divide it by a million, and then that's how you get your measurement of teraflops. So once I learned this, I'm like, this is a fun little exercise, because that isn't anywhere. So the number of instructions per clock has as much to do about your motherboard and your processor as it has to do with your graphics card. So you're talking about two measurements, which is your shaders and then the megahertz of the graphics card, and then your instructions per clock is based off of your motherboard and your processor. And I could be totally wrong on that. Again, I went to the internet to get this information, but it sounds correct. And as proof, you cannot just put in graphics card teraflops into a search engine and get an answer, because there's not a direct comparison, because this floating operational point of your computer actually is fluid. It's not set. And the other variable in this is not set is instructions per clock, because any instruction that you can give your computer can be less than a clock, a whole clock, or more than a clock.
Holy crap, this is complicated.
Yes, so for the purposes of this, we all just assume a computer that on average for a game can do 2 instructions per clock. And what we end up with, if you do it, you end up. I took the Scorpio's numbers and double checked it from the equation I got on a different site, and you get to 6 teraflops, right? So you take the Scorpio stats, and you will get to your 6 teraflops, which is super super interesting, I'm sure. But what the reason that I went into what a teraflop was, like for me personally. By the way, the 4K Neo Super Duper Pro is at 4.2 teraflops. Again, something that is not that big of a deal, and here's why I know that, to me, not that big of a deal. Generally speaking, in the long term, it's going to hurt, but generally speaking, I took my rig, right? So I run an NVIDIA 970, which is a graphics card that's almost 2 years old already. It came out in 2015, I think summer 2015, or right about this time, 2015. So when I got it, it was already a year-old technology, and now they're up to the 1080. So my rig right now with the NVIDIA 970 and Intel i7 6700 quad-core, right? And I don't know what the hell motherboard I have. I took it to go 2 clocks. We're going 2 instructions per IPCs, 2 instructions per clock across the board for this, right? With mine, I'm at 3.5 teraflops. Right? So,
But your games look better than a PS4.
well,
no?
here's why. Because a PS4 and an Xbox One right now are running at just above 1 teraflop.
Oh.
So my system is essentially 3 times using this floating operational point 3 times better than an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4. Just mathematically, that's where it is.
I see.
Now, with that being said, it is a little more than half of what the Scorpio will be, right? Which is 6.02 teraflops. Ooh, I love saying that word, right? So right now, a Scorpio is better than my rig, right?
Yeah.
With that being said, my rig is actually comparable to what the PlayStation Pro is going to be putting out.
And that's the 4 teraflops.
The 4 teraflops, right? So me at 3.5 and them at 4. I think they're at 4.2 or 4 either. It's about a half teraflop difference. Not that big of a deal from what I can tell, because if they're just going to bring themselves up essentially to where I'm at, and then it'll take a few years. Now, with that being said, the issue that if we're going to use this as our measuring stick, if we're going to flop it around like our big floppy technology cock, right? We have to go with the idea that the PlayStation 4 has decided to catch up, and the Scorpio has decided to take a half step ahead. And here's why I'm going to go with half step. Because I did the same calculations with an NVIDIA 1080 Ti. All right? And I believe the Ti is the one they put in the laptops, right? That's the more portable version? Or is the Ti the full?
No, the TI is like the maximum.
So that was a maximum card. All right, so that was the maximum card that you can get right now, because I'm not aware of the 1090 coming out. So at the maximum card you can do with my same computer, all I do is change the video card, which again is where you get 2 of those numbers, which is the shaders and the megahertz on your graphics card. I ended up with 11.34 terabytes. So that
terabyte.
Terraflops.
Not teraflop?
Terraflops.
Okay.
Terraflops. Sorry. Terraflops. Terraflops. Ooh, I almost fucked that up. So I ended up with 11.34 teraflops, which means if you take my computer's guts, right, which is essentially a year and a half old, right? It's a year and a half old physically. The video card in it is almost 2 years old. Not the actual card, but the technology behind it, right?
Yeah.
So now we're saying that what I'm running is essentially 2-year-old technology. Right? Regardless of manufacture date. 2-year-old technology.
2-year-old.
Today's technology is 3 times more teraflops than what I'm currently using. 2 years later. And the new addition, this half step forward in the console side of the house, one is just catching up to my 2-year-old technology, and one is stepping ahead of 2-year-old technology, but is still at least half as bad as the top of the line you can get in games. And I only point that out because they've been waving their teraflops around for almost a year. We're 2 months from E3 of this year. It was E3 of last year where Sony and Microsoft were going teraflop, 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 teraflop. And now that I know how to calculate it, and I know where I have my point of reference, which is my computer, right, versus the field now. And again, my computer is not some like amazing thing out there. It's not even liquid cooled. It still uses fans, for God's sakes. But as a measure to that, what does that make you think, right? Because all those numbers, all that is to paint the picture that me as a person who games on consoles, I game on handhelds, I game on consoles, I game on PC, right? I run the gamut, I experience it all, and then something happened, and we'll get into that a little later, where I started to turn, and that just has to do with time and technology and the affordability of things. Like, do you think it's wise? Because this is not, now we're not just talking Microsoft, we're talking about consoles. Because remember, you got the Scorpio and you got the PlayStation Pro, but then you also got the Nintendo Switch that came out. And I think they have like a quarter teraflop. I have no idea what they're running.
They're
right?
not talking about teraflops.
Yeah, they're not talking about teraflops because I think they just did this last one. I didn't bother looking up their numbers. Probably just caught up to where the Xbox One and the PS4 are. So you're talking about an entire
half generation
group of hardware that's just going, hey, here's some stuff. Or are they? Or are they doing something different and I'm missing it?
So that's a lot of information when it comes to teraflops. My thing was that
show prep, son. It's called show prep.
A lot of show prep, I could tell. A lot of calculations and numbers. It sounds like homework, and you went to a class. All right. But like when I looked at the teraflop thing, I was like, this is so awkward because this is coming from the home console gaming side. Like you don't hear Nvidia and AMD going, hey, check out our latest graphics card. It has 8 teraflops, 12 teraflops. So it kind of took me off guard, and I was kind of like, yeah, this has to be make believe.
Right. But again, the reason that the graphics card people don't say that is because that's not a measurement of graphics cards. It is the floating operational point that includes how many instructions per clock can be put into the system, which, again, as my understanding goes, includes the measurement of your processor speed and your motherboard in order to get instructions per clock. So it's not just the graphics card by itself, which is why we've never heard this term before in PC land, because the people who brag about their individual component. Intel brags about the processor, NVIDIA brags about the video card. RAM people brag about, well, nothing. RAM is a set number, but the motherboard people go, I've got 87 slots. Stick everything in me. I'm a motherboard. You know what I'm saying? So
that makes it even more interesting because that's AMD. That's from what I understand, they're doing system on a chip. So it has the CPU and the GPU on one chip. So this is all AMD.
Yes, they went with AMD for all their stuff.
Yeah. So and that's like
both by the way, both Sony and
exactly the
and
other
Microsoft.
layer of this is they're almost exactly the same hardware, other than the newer RAM, which from what I understand is now the same. So Xbox Scorpio is now using DDR5 or GDDR5, whatever it's called, and so is PS4. So they're the same there, only that the Scorpio is now doing 12, right? 12 gigs of RAM, 8 for the games, and then 4 for the UI and the system to run. So it's essentially the same kind of hardware. So I guess it gets even more confusing when they start throwing around the teraflops, at least for me. So I understand what you're saying, but for me and my brain, and I'm sure other viewers are kind of like, I thought teraflops were like graphic stuff, and it's not. From all that you've explained, it doesn't necessarily have to do with graphics at all.
No, it 100% has to do with graphics. It is. So yes, it's the floating operational point. But look at the calculations. The calculations are the shaders and the speed of the graphics card multiplied by each other times the number of times that graphics card can send an instruction per clock. All right, so you have to. So you got to. I'm not just explaining this for your good, but you got to think about it. If you put like an awesome, I don't know shit about cars, but you put an awesome engine in a car, right? And the car has shit tires, it's gonna go slower than if you had new tires or good tires or whatever the hell it is car people do, right? I'm sure there's something in there with a transmission, something. Better analogy some other day. But if you just took like a super awesome like video card, first of all, it wouldn't even work with some lower end stuff. But if I took like a 5-year-old rig and try to put 1090i, it's going to be limited by the motherboard and the CPU and the RAM if they can't run it, right? So here's the thing, right? All the sources I have show that the Xbox Scorpio has more shaders, right? And that is what's giving them the edge in this teraflop fight. Because the number of instructions per clock is the same. Like you said, they're basically using the same RAM, right? They're basically using the same technology under hood. What's different is their version of their AMD CPU love, Siamese twin love monster that they're putting in there. And the speeds are comparable, but there's more shaders on
the Scorpio.
On the Scorpio, and because we're using multiplication, not addition, the teraflop fucking thing goes from by two. You understand that it's like 1,000 more shaders on the Scorpio, and that's going to give you 2 million more flops of stuff, right? And those 2 million you turn to a tera apiece. So you get two more teraflops of this measurement of graphical awesomeness based not on speed or power, but on shaders, which is inherent to the graphics card itself. Well, we're gonna go GPU because it's not. I keep saying graphics card, but graphics card, that's a PC thing. It's a card you pull out and you pull in. It's not like that AMD for that, right? I mean, it's an AMD, and then since it's a GPU and a CPU together, I feel like there's another term for it we're just not properly using.
It's just system on a chip from what I looked up.
System on a chip. That sounds delicious, bro.
Yep. So with that said, I think that's the whole teraflop thing. What I'm getting and connecting the
Terraflop. I can't help it. If I'm not saying it, I find the term humorous. Go ahead.
What I'm connecting it to is that this is what's making it possible for the Scorpio to run native 4K games. Because from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, the PS4 is doing trickery to fool you into it being a 4K image.
So I've read conflicting reports on that, and I feel like we had this when the 1 and 4 came out, where one system was like, it's 1080p, 60 frames per second, and they're like, the other one is upscaling. You know what I'm saying? And then like a year later, they were like the hardware didn't change, right? The hardware did not change from the launch of these systems till now, and they both run 1080p at 60 frames per second, right? Right? That is true, right? So
for the most part, yeah. So, now they have like 900p, which is weird.
Yeah, so it's like clearly when something new comes out, there's limitations to what game developers can do with it, and then if they create shortcuts. So in the development kit, sometimes my understanding is, especially when a console cycle starts, in order to make the transition easier for game developers, sometimes they'll put things in there to make upscaling easier, and it's not necessarily a limitation of what's going on. Again, at my teraflops, I can run 4K games. I just need a 4K monitor. I don't run 4K games. I don't have a 4K monitor. I also don't have 4K media since I'm on the subject, so it would be a total waste. But I have the power to do it on these. So if the PlayStation 4 is going to come, the PlayStation 4 Pro is going to come out, and it's going to have similar specs, about half more teraflop, there'd be no reason that I can think of scientifically, from my limited knowledge of how the guts of these things work, that it wouldn't be able to. But I do know, as far as my experience goes, my anecdotal stuff that's happened every time a new console comes out lately, when it comes out, a lot of these game developers, if there's a way to just upscale it to 4K, they'll upscale it to 4K, because odds are they were already making the game. Yeah. So it makes it easier for them. And then in 2 years from now, when their start to finish of the game development cycle includes this new piece of hardware, that's when you're really gonna see it, because that's something else we have to take into account as consumers of this stuff. Games take I don't know a game that gets made in under 2 years. I'm not aware of it. I'd be interested to see the sports ones when they come out, but I know games like Call of Duty to come out every year, and even when the Splinter Cells were coming out every year, those two popped in my head immediately. They had 2 different studios working on them concurrently. Yeah. So it would be like, hey, this studio's doing this year, this studio's, so that it wasn't a game coming out a year. It was a game coming out a year, but it wasn't a development team working on a game a year. It was a game development team doing a 2-year arc, and then with another one in the middle. So it's not like I don't know how long the development kits have been made available to the game developers or everything, because they want everything tries to work in a controlled environment and all that other stuff. So we don't know all these factors because we're not behind the scenes. But it's something to take into consideration because again, teraflops, but it doesn't matter, right? Like it's not going to matter now. It's going to matter in 2 years. And again, I don't know the difference of two teraflops. I just found out how many teraflops I have.
This will be very interesting to see, though, because you have the Scorpio making such a huge jump that it's like it shouldn't just be about upscaling. They should really use the available teraflops to really create something new and different. But that then puts the original Xbox One in a strange position because we're Xbox One owners. We already have the lag. We have the constant crashes. We have a unstable system-ish.
The fuck are you doing your Xbox? I don't have any of those problems.
I don't know. I've been playing Final Fantasy 15 and what other game was it? It crashed on me on Overwatch a few times. And this is recently after the update. And I was like, it's terrible. All I'm trying to say is it'll be very interesting to see what Xbox plans to do now that they have such a substantial upgraded console compared to what they had to begin with. So you're talking about a completely different set of RAM to crazy amounts of RAM. So it's going to be interesting to see. That's what I'm trying to get to. Yeah. While the PS4, it was just kind of like, we kind of, it's just a little upgrade. You can now upscale to 4K. That's it. You'll be all right.
But it's not a small upgrade for the PlayStation. It is a 4 times better teraflop, right? Again, this is stupid. Listen, using that measuring stick, it's 4 times better. Well, no, it's not exactly. It's like three and a half times better because it was 1 point something there. So it's like 3.5 times better. Where they're going from 1 something to 6 something on the Xbox side, so it could effectively be a 6 times better system or like a 4 point something better system again because the decimal points and whatever when you're using multiplication. It's this in terms of what they're doing is a big deal, right? Like I feel like it's a big jump across the board because again, there's not a host of people running rigs right now with 1080 NVIDIA 1080s in them. There just isn't. Like, that's not a thing, right? There's a lot of people, but if you do it mathematically, the number of people running 1080s versus the number of people running 970, 980s, like, it's a huge gap, right? And then you can go even down lower into that. There's still people running 780s and 680s. Like, it keeps going, like, down. So the number of people whose PCs will actually not be comparable to these consoles for the first time in a long time, right? It like, to me, is a big deal, right? And I say this because the other thing that I wanted to get into, right? As far as like the progression of gaming, because I was a console first gamer forever until 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, right? And then what happened was the affordability of PC gaming. Now I know a lot of like the diehard people who are PC gaming for eons. Like, man, it's always been like that. It's been like that for longer than 5 years, but it has not always been that way. It hasn't always been that way. Your cost savings was always in the console gaming side of the house because you could buy one system. That was a system for that extended period of time, and the games were optimized for those specifications. And to prove my point, a lot of times, like, you'll go and you'll get a game that's on console first, and it does happen, people. Sometimes a game comes out for consoles first, and then they bring it to PC, and one of the biggest complaints that you'll get is poorly optimized PC port. I mean, console port, right? And the reason for that is because a lot of times they'll just clone the game and throw it on, and then it'll just be a shit show. everywhere. And the reason for that is because a PC game, you have to, like, there's a lot of factors to get it to optimize. Like I just said, an entire range of possible graphics cards and RAM and everything that you're talking about versus optimizing something for a console that's like, hey, here are your specs, make it work on this. And even then, it doesn't always work out. But that was always a change. And then something happened probably for me 5 years ago, but probably closer, like probably 8 years ago. It just, stuff just became more affordable, right? I mean, part of it started with the almost annual production of like graphics cards. Like I felt like when graphics card became huge fanfare, right? And then just the whole push towards like the mobile arms race, where stuff was just happening so fast that it became a thing where you didn't feel left behind like on a phone, right? So you would have a phone and you'll have like, oh, the LG G6 or Samsung 8 came out, right? You have a Samsung 5, you kind of feel fucking like you're like behind the times, right? But it didn't work like that. When the 1080 came out, when they announced that one, I was like, I wonder how much the 970 is. Like, that's my first thought, because I'm like, oh, shit, I think I can build a rig. I think I can build a rig for like $800, and I did, and I was able to. And you couldn't do that before because people always say, "Oh, it's really easy. You build a rig and you can upgrade as you want to." There's all the old school PC guys about, you can upgrade whatever you want. You can just throw in more RAM and this and that. I'm like, why? Why would I do that? Like, why would I just on the fly throw more RAM into the computer? Oh, so you could play it on Ultra? I'm like, yeah, I could play it at maxed out graphics on the console. It's designed for. Like, I'm not going to get better than this. Like, my buddy's not getting a better game experience. We're getting it. That was the whole thing of picking your thing, and you had that long-term security. That long-term security blanket just went away. All right? Yeah. That long-term security blanket is gone. I want to say 5 years. That arms race where it made it better for PC in terms of the affordability of the components, because components are coming out so often. That, I mean, even the RAM, like, I have 16 gigs of RAM or whatever, right? You could have 16 gigs of RAM. One of our RAM's faster, right? Like, the size is the same, but someone has DRM, and the other guy has GMO free, and the other guy has BPH or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what the fuck is going on? Yeah. This, like, it's the measurement is the gigs of RAM, but it's like, no, there's still faster RAM, even within bandwidth of gigs. And then you're like, but you never feel inadequate. Like, if you can get a decent enough rig, you could. I feel right now like I'm gonna have this for as long as I'm now gonna have had my Xbox One. Like my PC is now gonna be with me with the exact same specs for as long as my Xbox One is gonna end up being with me, because I'm probably gonna get a Scorpio.
See, and that same here. I definitely want to pre-order that bad boy.
Yeah, but I'm a gadgetaholic though. I don't count. I'm
That's
not indicative. I'm not sample size.
So I think that here's where the line gets blurred, right? Because they, at least for Xbox, they're like, oh my God, no, this is not like a PC thing. This is not a small upgrade or something like that. But essentially, that's what it is. You're talking about the new Xbox is going to have the extreme setting, while your old Xbox is going to have what, like maximum or something, or whatever it is, because it's the same thing that we're seeing with the PS4. If you play Horizon for the regular PS4, it looks great. It still looks good. But if you play it for the Pro, you see so much more detail and such, a richer world. Yeah. Right? So this is not just a small here console. This is definitely a graphical and CPU upgrade. So now that system is going to run very different than what we have now. And that's where the confusion for a lot of people is happening, because they're kind of like, they think that this is just, a Xbox Slim or something, some other thing that they can get.
You know what I'm saying? You say that, but they launched the Xbox Slim like last year, and I'm like, who's gonna buy that?
Exactly.
That's like
how confusing it is.
Within a year. But I wouldn't call that though. It's for the modern consumer. I can see what you're saying. Like, for the modern consumer, it is confusing, but because the consoles are essentially sealed, right? They're sealed systems that you can't upgrade the way you can do a PC, and like is the half step the future, right? Because they're not calling it the end of a console generation, right? But right now, Microsoft as a whole, their philosophy is Windows 10 is the last Windows, and they're like, any upgrade we make to Windows, we're just gonna call it Windows, right?
Yeah.
So I'm starting to think that they just might do that
Call
with
it
the
Xbox.
Xbox. They it seems that they would be completely content with going, yeah, technology changed, so here's a new Xbox with the new technology. You could buy it, or you can wait till the next new technology Xbox comes out, and then you can have this one. They'll all play the same games.
Which would be extremely smart, especially if they continue to do the Xbox 360 backwards compatibility thing. Like you're talking about, 4X new Xbox down or up or whatever, with more and more teraflops, and you'll still be able to play your library. So that'd be great.
Right, but what it seems like to me they're essentially doing, both of these guys, Sony and Microsoft, is they've made Steam machines.
Yeah, yeah.
And they've gone, look, guys, here are our Steam machines, except you can't get Steam games on it. We'll call those indie games ID at Xbox, and that's what you're getting. It's very weird. It's not weird. It almost seems like the natural progression of the console PC eventually meeting halfway, and then especially since it's gonna get to a point now where, like, if you don't do like if you're not doing any multimedia, right? You can do all of the computer stuff on your phone if it's not multimedia, right? You can do it on a tablet too. You can keep, like, if you need to do some word processing, you can do all that on a tablet and an external monitor, and you can get it done that way. And if you want to get gaming, if eventually consoles essentially turn to Steam machines, and you have Steam machines, at some point that's the direction it's going to go, because you're not going to be able to sell me on you can also do this. Like, I need a computer to do this. Like, I need the computing power of something to make videos. Like, we're more and more niche. As a matter of fact, I read an article the other day about Apple and how they basically went on a very short apology tour to all the multimedia people who are actually keeping them afloat for years, going, yeah, I know we've been doing nothing but making iPods, phones, and iPads for years, and that doesn't fucking help you guys out at all, and you're the reason that we were allowed to live in the 90s and the early 2000s. Here's a few Macs for you. Here's a few iMacs, full-fledged. Here's the little one. Here's the big server size one for you guys. We still love you. So it's gonna get to that point because it's what they need to consume. I don't know if I had a point. I don't know if this show had a point. I don't.
I think that the last thing I want to say is that the biggest difference between this and PC, I think, is the affordability. Because the estimates that are being thrown around right now for the Xbox Scorpio is around between maybe $400 or $500, and that's
right.
extremely affordable
That's about right.
for that amount of teraflop. Like, for that amount of money, you could buy a 1080 and that's it, and then you have to figure out how to get everything else, right?
Right.
So,
Well. Okay. Now you say that, but right now, all I need is a 1080, right?
Yeah.
I have an Xbox, right? So really, all I need is what? A little bit more RAM and that new GPU, and I can't do that, right? I mean, with most laptops, you can do that either. So I just float that one out there. Just float it out. That if every 5 years we're gonna get what essentially amounts to a graphics card update, then you can't say, oh, all you can afford is a graphics card, because guess what? I still needed to have a TV, right? So, like, I still needed to have the TV to use the console. So the fact that I had to get a monitor and a mouse and keyboard, I'm going to call that one a push. Just throw that one out there. Point, counterpoint. I counterpointed you. We're going to be all right.
All right.
Anyway, all right. So this has been the Space Chicken Terraflop Spectacular.
Flopping the flops.
If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe button. Got anything to say about the future of game consoles versus PC gaming, without starting a goddamn console war. We don't care about your personal allegiance to a company that plans on fucking you in the long run anyway. Just as a general idea, go ahead and leave us a comment down below. If you have anything you guys want to hear us talk about, again, let us know in the comments. Don't forget, we have all of our old videos. I might be able to do a thing where I make them appear around me. I don't know. Maybe I won't. Who knows? I haven't figured out YouTube yet. Yeah. And, of course, check us out on No Answers Gaming. So watch the game, us play Paladins mostly. It's not a Paladins channel, but we play a lot of Paladins.
Paladins.
All right. Say bye, Will.